Hey, I'm Sapphire.
Want to hear something scary? During a very cold winter when Kay was 8 years old, she developed a very serious chest infection that hospitalized her. She was constantly coughing and struggling to breathe, so the nurses advised her parents to leave her at the hospital for a few days. The walls of the children's ward were covered in happy cartoon characters, which made the rooms feel warm, despite the sterile smell. At the end of the ward, there was a single room with windows looking out into the ward. Inside was a small girl in a pink nightshirt and pajama bottoms, with no hair and a drip hooked up to her small, thin arm. That's Amy. She's been here for quite a while. The next day, it was playtime after lunch. Kay pulled out some comic books that she had brought with her and caught a glimpse of Amy through her window. She waved the book to her, and Amy nodded vigorously and motioned for her to come in. "Can I go in her room?" Kay asked her nurse. "Of course. That's very sweet of you. Most of the other children won't go near her." Kay entered Amy's room, and they instantly became great friends. Amy loved to sing, and they made up silly dances to some of her made-up songs. The day flew by, and it was time for lights out. "We're going to have even more fun tomorrow," Kay told Amy before heading back to her bed. Later that night, Kay was awoken by a small hand shaking her shoulder gently. She opened her eyes to find Amy, standing beside her bed. "I need to go outside. Will you help me?" Kay looked around the ward. There was no one else there. No kids, no nurses, just her and Amy. Before Kay could make sense of what was going on, Amy took her hand and they walked slowly down the hallway. The entire hospital was empty. Where was everybody? The clocks along the walls seemed to be ticking much slower than usual. "What are we doing?" "Too scared to go on my own. I can't go alone. You were nice to me." After what seemed like hours, Kay and Amy finally reached the main entrance, and Amy let go of her hand. "Should I come too?" Amy shook her head. "It's my turn. You have to wait for your turn." Thinking it was a game, Kay asked if it would be her turn when she came back inside. Amy shook her head again, sadly. "Are we still going to play together tomorrow?" "I don't know. You have to go back now." "I'm not going back without you. I don't want you to get in trouble." "You have to go back. Can't stay. Go back." For a brief moment, Kay turned around to look towards the corridor they came from. It looked so much darker than before. She turned back towards the entrance, but Amy was nowhere to be seen. Realizing she had no other choice, Kay made her way back to her bed. She noticed that all the clocks seemed to be stuck at 3:35 a.m. As she climbed back into her bed, Kay glanced over at Amy's empty room. What was she going to tell the doctors, the nurses, her family? The next morning, Kay awoke to the nurse clapping her hands to wake everyone up for breakfast. Kay looked over at Amy's room. The curtains had been drawn. As Kay ate her breakfast, Amy's parents came rushing in and she overheard the nurses speaking to them. "What time did we lose her?" 3:36 a.m.
Thanks for agreeing to this, Sarah. Are you comfortable?
Yes, I am.
Okay, why don't we start with how you're feeling right now?
Numb. Just like every other day. It never gets easier.
I understand. What you've been through is tough. Why don't you take some deep breaths and let's start at the beginning, okay? Is that okay with you? Let's start with Tom.
All right. What can I say about Tom? I really miss him, you know? God, I really do. It's the little things, you know? Like when I'd pull some clothes from the wardrobe and his cologne would still linger there. Luke was the only thing that kept me going.
Luke's your son, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was about a year after we had him that we found out that Tom had cancer. He hadn't been feeling well, but he had been putting off seeing a doctor. There was just so much to do in those early years, starting a new life together. The doctors said if only he saw them sooner, they may have detected the cancer earlier. Then it may not have spread. Then it may have been operable. Then he might still be alive. It was hard seeing him waste away. He was so sure that Luke was going to be a sports star like his dad. He couldn't wait for Luke to be old enough for them to throw a ball around in the yard together. By the time Luke was old enough, though, Tom was already too weak to even lift a ball, let alone go outside. He would just lie in bed all day, too exhausted and weak to do anything. Instead of playing sports together, they played pen and paper games. Luke really loved playing hangman, though. He loved guessing letters at silly words or phrases his father would come up with. And he really loved drawing that little hangman figure. He drew that a lot. He was terrible at the game, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was his dad loved playing with him too. I would sometimes find them both asleep in bed, covered in paper. Tom would get tired easily and had this habit of dozing off. But rather than wake his dad, Luke would decide it was his nap time too. He'd crawl right next to Tom and fall asleep hugging him. That day came when Luke woke up, but Tom didn't. When I found them both, he was holding on to Tom, hugging him tightly. He was crying and pleading with his dad not to go. "I love you, Dad. Please don't go. We still haven't finished our game yet," he cried.
And how did Luke handle everything afterward?
He became very quiet and sullen, kept holding on to that paper pad and wouldn't let it go. I once asked him if he'd feel better if we played hangman like he used to with Tom. He just shook his head. To him, it didn't feel right for anyone else to finish it.
But that changed, right? Your report said...
Yes, it changed. About 4 months after Tom's death. Luke bounced back to normal. I just thought it was because children are more resilient, you know? I was cleaning his room one day and found his notepad. I flipped to the last page with that unfinished hangman game. Except he had completed it now. And it wasn't the last game anymore. There were dozens of pages filled with new games of hangman. When Luke got home from school, I asked him about it. He was a bit angry and a bit scared, but he eventually said he'd tell me if I promised not to get mad or punish him.
So, what was going on?
His best friend at school had seen how sad Luke was about the death of his father, so he gave him a Ouija board. He told Luke it was for speaking with the dead, so now he could talk with his dad. Luke told me he had been using it and has been playing hangman with his dad ever since.
How did you react to that?
I didn't know what to think at first. I was skeptical, shocked, horrified, all at once. Part of my mind was flashing warning lights saying it's dangerous to be playing with spiritual forces we don't understand. Another part was saying it's complete horseshit. But all that noise was drowned out by the only question I really cared about. Did it work? I was desperate. I wanted to talk to Tom again so badly. I would have given anything for a chance. So after Luke had gone to sleep, I took out the Ouija board and set it on the dining table. I placed my finger on the glass ring and waited. I whispered, "Are you there, Tom? Please let me know if you're there." Nothing at first. Then the ring started to move. It moved to the hello in the corner. I gasped and let go of the ring. I must have just sat and stared at that thing for like an hour as if it was possessed. Well, I guess it was, kinda. I placed my finger on it again. I asked, "Is that you, Tom?" The ring edged up to the yes in the corner. Where did I get the scar at the back of my head? The scar was hidden under my hair. No one except Tom even knew about the accident that created it. VENICE. My eyes were so wet with tears. The impossible was happening. It was Tom, and we were talking. I told him I loved him and missed him so much. My finger was still on the ring as it started moving. NOTMUCHTIME. What did he mean? Was he trying to say we didn't have enough time together before he died, or that he doesn't have much time before he needs to go again? "No, you left us too soon. Luke misses you too," I said. LOOKAFTERLUKE. I am, and I will. It's been so hard without you here, you know? Or are you saying you've been looking after him? Because he says you've been playing hangman with him. I waited for a response, but the ring didn't move. I waited and waited, but it didn't respond to any more questions that night. Eventually, I went to bed. But you know what? For the first time for as long as I could remember, I was actually smiling. It may only have been a few words, but to me, it was everything.
Did you try to contact Tom again?
Of course I did. Every day I could. It was my obsession. I am ALWAYSHERE. We talked about Luke and how he was doing in school. We talked about our honeymoon. We talked about the dates we used to go on together. FORYOU. We talked about anything and everything. It was sometimes surreal. Sometimes it was even passionate. There's some funny ones, you know. He once even spelled out,
I watch you shower.
Another time I told him that I didn't want to go to sleep because the bed seemed empty without him.
I lie beside you when you sleep.
It was almost enough to make me go to bed.
Can we talk about what happened that day you found Luke in his room?
Oh, that. Yeah, I guess. That's what this is really all about, isn't it? That's why you're here? I figured we'd get to this part eventually.
If it's not too hard to talk about.
It's fine. I've gone through it 1,000 times before with the police. What's one more? Like I said, I'm numb now. It's still a blur, really. I had finished making dinner and called for Luke to come down. He usually yells back to me to tell me he's coming, but he didn't respond that day. I eventually tired of yelling and went to his room to get him. He was lying face down on the floor. His neck was twisted at an odd angle and his eyes were staring blankly at the wall. Near one hand was his pad and pen, and that damned cursed Ouija board near his other. I just kept screaming his name over and over, hoping he could hear me. I just held him in my arms. My baby. My poor, precious baby.
What had happened to him?
I was hugging him tight and kissing him. I refused to let him go. Not after losing Tom. I couldn't lose Luke, too. My eyes landed on the pad he was scribbling on. He had been playing hangman again.
You were never alone. I am the hangman.
I had a sickening realization that it may not have just been Tom that I had been communicating with.
You were warned.
At least not after that first night. A sharp chill began stabbing at my heart. The last game at the bottom. A completed drawing of the hangman figure scrawled beside it. It's the last thing I remember. Inside, I'm still screaming, you know? I don't think it will ever end. Far out in the ocean, the water is as blue as the petals of the loveliest cornflower and as clear as the purest glass. But it is very deep, too. It goes down deeper than any anchor rope will go, and many, many steeples would have to be stacked one on top of another to reach from the bottom to the surface of the sea. It is down there that the sea folk live. There was the Sea Queen, along with her granddaughters, the Sea Princesses. They were 6 lovely girls, but the youngest was the most beautiful of them all. Her skin was as soft and tender as a rose petal, and her eyes were as blue as the deep sea. But like all the others, she had no feet. Her body ended in a fishtail. The Little Mermaid loved hearing stories about the human world above. Her grandmother told her all she knew about ships and cities and of people and animals. The flowers were fragrant up there, for those at the bottom of the sea had no scent. When you are 15, her grandmother said, you will be allowed to rise up out of the ocean and sit on the rocks in the moonlight to watch the great ships sailing by. On her 15th birthday, the Little Mermaid rose up to the surface and watched a birthday celebration being held on a ship in honor of a handsome prince. She watched in awe as he laughed and smiled and shook people by the hand, while the music rang out in the perfect evening. She couldn't take her eyes off of him. Then a violent storm hit, sinking the boat. The Little Mermaid swam towards the sinking prince and pulled him ashore. He lay there unconscious near a temple. She waited from a distance until a young woman from the temple found him. The prince regains consciousness and mistook the temple woman for his rescuer. He never even saw the Little Mermaid. Distraught, she dove back into the ocean. If men aren't drowned, the Little Mermaid asked her grandmother, do they live on forever? They too must die, and their lifetimes are even shorter than ours. We can live to be 300 years old, but when we perish, we turn into mere foam on the sea. We have no immortal soul. Human beings, on the contrary, have a soul which lives forever, long after their bodies have turned to clay. It rises through thin air up to the shining stars. Just as we rise through the water to see the lands on earth, so men rise up to beautiful places unknown, which we shall never see. I would gladly give up my 300 years if I could be a human for a day and later share in that heavenly realm.
You must not think about that.
We are much better off than the folk up there. The Little Mermaid, longing for the prince and an eternal soul, visited the sea witch in a dangerous part of the ocean. The witch willingly sold her a potion that would give her legs in exchange for her tongue and beautiful voice. She warned her that once she became a human, she will never be able to return to the sea. And she will only obtain a soul if she won the love of the prince and married him. Otherwise, at dawn on the first day after he married someone else, the Little Mermaid would die with a broken heart and dissolve into sea foam upon the waves. After she agreed to the arrangement, the Little Mermaid swam to the surface near the prince's palace and drank the potion. The liquid felt like a sword piercing through her body, and she passed out on the shore, naked. When she came to, the prince was standing above her. He asked her where she came from, but she couldn't speak. He pulled her up, and for the first time she saw her 2 new human legs. He walked her back to his palace to give her clothes, but every step she took was agony. It felt like she was stepping on knives. It was horribly unpleasant, but she knew this was part of the bargain. Over time, the Little Mermaid and the prince became great friends, but unfortunately, nothing more. When the prince's parents encouraged their son to marry, he asked for the temple woman's hand, for he thought she was the one who rescued him after the storm. So the Little Mermaid had no choice but to silently witness the prince marry his new bride aboard a wedding ship. After the ceremony, she looked to the east to see the first red hint of daybreak, for she knew that the first flash of the sun would strike her dead. Then she saw her sisters rise up among the waves. There was no sign of their lovely long hair that the breezes used to blow. It had all been cut off. "We have given our hair to the witch," they said, "so that she would send you help and save you from death tonight. She gave us this knife. Before the sun rises, you must strike it into the prince's heart, and when his warm blood bathes your feet, they will grow together and become a fishtail. Then you will be a mermaid again, and you can come back to us in the sea and live out your 300 years. Hurry!
Come back to us, sister.
We miss you." The Little Mermaid entered the prince's room, where he and his bride lay fast asleep. Slowly, she raised the magic blade above his head, and she heard him speak his bride's name in his sleep. The blade fell from her trembling hands. "The prince's happiness is my happiness. Good night, sweet prince." She walked back outside, stood on the edge of the ship, and threw herself into the ocean, just as dawn broke. Her body dissolved into foam, but instead of ceasing to exist, she turned into a luminous and ethereal earthbound spirit, a daughter of the air. Because of her selflessness, she was given the chance to earn a soul, and after 300 years of good deeds to humanity, she will rise up to where no mermaid had been before. If you love this story, I highly recommend watching the 1975 animated film from Toei Animation, and I dare you not to cry. If you'd like to submit a story, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Like and share this video if it gave you the chills, and don't forget to subscribe to Snarled and turn on the bell for notifications. And if you dare, follow me on social media. Until next time, sweet dreams.